I rise today to discuss the critical role that U.S. attorneys play in keeping America and our communities safe. Unfortunately, this is not the first time I've come to the floor to request unanimous consent to take up and confirm U.S. attorney nominations. Across the United States, men and women are chosen to head U.S. attorney offices through the Department of Justice. It is a major responsibility. I've seen many U.S. attorneys in my lifetime and in my time in the Senate, and I know them to be carefully screened before they reach this level. They go through background checks, extensive background checks, to make certain there are no questions about their background before they are appointed to this position. They then go through the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, which I chair, carefully screened by both Democrats and Republicans. Then they are voted on in the committee and sent to the floor here for approval. Unfortunately, we've run into an obstacle. Last year, we went through an exercise twice when a Republican Senate colleague refused to allow the Senate to confirm nearly 12 Justice Department nominees by voice vote, which is the typical approach used under presidents of both political parties. Thankfully, the senator involved in that particular issue lifted his objections in time for these 12 to be appointed to U.S. attorney posts across the United States. We were able to get the U.S. attorneys and marshals confirmed and in a place so that they could go to work, and thank goodness we did it. Unfortunately, here we stand again today, finding ourselves in a position where a single senator objects to the timely confirmation of U.S. attorney nominees. In short, one senator is making it more difficult for us to put women and men in the position of U.S. attorney for the prosecution of violent criminals, tracking down fugitives, and protecting Americans from gang violence, cybercrime, terrorism, narcotics, and fraud. It's an awesome job to be a U.S. attorney because of the possibilities of all the vulnerability of American citizens. Remember when extreme voices were crying out, defund the police? We knew better as Americans. Sure, reform is appropriate, but we need the police, just as we need prosecutors, criminal prosecutors. Now we have one senator who has decided to stop this effort at criminal prosecution by these new U.S. attorneys. It's worth taking a moment to think about what U.S. attorneys do. The position of U.S. attorney is nearly as old as the nation. It was created as part of the Judiciary Act of 1789, which was passed by the first Congress, signed into law by President George Washington. U.S. attorneys are empowered to prosecute all federal criminal offenses, and we have recognized since the founding of America that they are an integral part of our justice system. U.S. attorneys play a critical role in enforcing the law, promoting public safety, protecting our communities. Blocking the confirmations of U.S. attorneys threatens public safety and puts many Americans and their families, including the most vulnerable among us, at greater risk. Why would we knowingly want to put our families that we represent in states across America at greater risk by holding up the appointment of U.S. attorneys? Now, we've heard a lot of tough talk about law and order from a lot of senators, but when it comes to law and order, we shouldn't allow one senator to prevent us from confirming well-qualified law enforcement nominations today. This senator has vowed, and I quote, to grind the Department of Justice to a halt. Let me repeat that. This senator has vowed to grind the Department of Justice to a halt. And all of this because of why? He's upset that Special Counsel Jack Smith has indicted the former President of the United States on multiple felonies. This is a protest, a political protest for an action taken by a special counsel. But he's doing it at the expense of families all across America. Let me repeat, a member of this body is undermining our government's efforts to prosecute violent crime, terrorism, and crimes against children because he does not like it that one of his political allies is being held accountable for his actions. He's doing so despite the fact that these are exceptional nominees for U.S. attorneys. and there is simply no principled basis to delay their confirmation. Let me describe some of these U.S. attorneys who are being held up by this one Republican senator. Todd G., nominated to be U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Mississippi, dedicated to the rule of law and a long-time career in public service. A native of Vicksburg, Mississippi, Mr. G. attended George Washington University and Tulane Law School. He spent several years as an assistant U.S. attorney right here in District of Columbia. He prosecuted homicides, carjackings, and gun crimes. In one case, he was the lead prosecutor, securing the convictions for 7 members of a deadly street gang who had been indicted for multiple murders. Since 2018, Mr. G. has served as Deputy Chief of Public Integrity Section at the Department of Justice. He is a dedicated public servant with significant experience as a federal prosecutor. He is the person for the job of U.S. Attorney in Mississippi. Don't take it from me. Take it from both Mississippi senators, both Republicans, who approved his nomination. And yet he's being held up. Tara McGrath, nominated to be U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California, devoted her legal career to keeping America safe. Ms. McGrath attended Boston College and the University of Michigan Law School before beginning her career as Deputy Staff Judge Advocate with the United States Marine Corps. She was honorably discharged after 6 years of service in the Marine Corps and then began serving as federal prosecutor in the Southern District of California. During her time with the U.S. Attorney's Office, she received awards for her work on crime prevention and prisoner reentry and handled drug importation, human trafficking cases, and gang prosecutions. Notably, Ms. McGrath led the investigation of a large-scale racketeering and drug trafficking operation run by the Mexican cartels in San Diego County that resulted in 51 indictments against 40 defendants. How many times, Mr. President, have we heard members from the other side of the aisle talk about the scourge of fentanyl in the United States, the narcotics that are killing too many Americans every single day? What's going to stop that? A lot of different things, but one thing that has to be part of the equation is a criminal prosecutor who knows how to bring him to court and to hold him responsible for the deadly narcotics and deaths across America. Why in the world would we stop Ms. McGrath from becoming a U.S. attorney in California, where she has a proven record of doing just that? By holding up her nomination for no specific reason, we are jeopardizing the safety of so many people who innocently expect us to do our duty. These are individuals, the ones she has prosecuted, responsible for drive-by shootings, child abduction attempts, meth distribution. Thanks to Ms. McGrath, they are off the streets. She recently returned to her military roots, served as a lawyer for the Marine Corps in Okinawa in Japan since 2019. She has represented America admirably. She would be an outstanding U.S. attorney. A third U.S. attorney nominee who's being held up by this senator is Rebecca Lutzko. This one is interesting. She was nominated to be U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, the home state of the senator who's holding up her nomination. She's a longtime federal prosecutor. She attended Boston University and Georgetown University Law before clerking on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. After 7 years in private practice, Ms. Lutzko joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio, handled cases involving prescription drug trafficking, gun crimes, and corruption. She eventually became appellate chief of the office's criminal division. For nearly a decade, Ms. Lutzko was the lead counsel in prosecuting an online pill mill organization that illegally distributed well over 4 million pain pills to customers in all 50 states. She secured convictions on all 12 defendants in the case, and the organization was forced to surrender $4 million to the U.S. government in criminal proceeds. She has served her office with distinction. She would be an outstanding U.S. attorney. April Perry, nominated to be U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. Significant experience in the private sector and as a federal prosecutor. She attended Northwestern University and the Northwestern Law School, and then clerked on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Then she served as federal prosecutor in the Northern District of Illinois for over a decade, where she handled narcotics, gang violence, public corruption, and fraud cases. Notably, Ms. Perry specialized in child exploitation prosecutions, spent 6 years in the office's Project Safe Childhood Coordinator. As an assistant U.S. attorney, she investigated a former police officer who was convicted of raping a person he had arrested, and she secured the conviction of a former priest who was accused of sexually abusing more than 20 children. Ms. Perry has since served as Chief Ethics Officer for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, currently working as the GE Healthcare as Senior Counsel for Global Investigation of Fraud and Abuse. She has the qualification and leadership abilities to serve as U.S. Attorney with distinction. The interesting thing about all of these nominees that are being held up by one senator from the other side of the aisle is the extraordinary records they have already written in their lives as criminal prosecutors. That is why senators from both political parties in the United States Senate have said they're entitled to a promotion and entitled to an opportunity to lead these U.S. Attorney's office. By keeping these posts vacant, by refusing to give us a vote in the Senate on their nominations, we are jeopardizing the efforts of U.S. Attorneys' offices to control narcotics and crime. These men and women are on the front line of keeping us safe in America. To hold up their nominations without any specific complaint about any one of these nominees is just unacceptable. We have a responsibility here to keep America safe. We can't keep them safe by using a political reason to hold up the nominations of these well-qualified people. If you're truly for law and order, if you're truly for law enforcement, if you want the prosecutors across America to keep us safe, then for goodness sakes, lift the hold on these nominations. Mr. President, I'm prepared to make a unanimous consent request at this point. I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations in block. Calendar number 129, number 266, number 314, and number 315. That the nominations be confirmed in block, the motions to reconsider be made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to any of the nominations, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Ohio.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, the senator from Illinois knows well I cannot and will not give consent to the confirmation of new officials at the Department of Justice. And my objection is not specific to the qualifications or the particular individuals that have been nominated. My objection is instead to the fact that we live in an era where the Department of Justice is used for politics as much as justice, and that's unacceptable. The DOJ is and always has been defined by its most consequential investigations and prosecutions. This DOJ is thus defined by its selective prosecution of the leader of the opposition, the man running against Joe Biden to become President of the United States. Of course, I'm speaking of Donald Trump. Now, this unprecedented double standard, selectively prosecuting Donald Trump, leaving the president and his family completely untouched, is a reason why the Department of Justice public confidence has completely collapsed. A recent NBC News survey showed that 35% of the American people approve of the Department of Justice, which is a radical decline from where it was just a couple of years ago. It is the constitutional duty of this body to provide advice and consent to high-level DOJ nominees. My real fear here, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be objecting to these nominees, but what I like much less is the fact that these nominees will be used by the Attorney General for politics over justice. Now, my colleague might say, and he might say this to Senator Tuberville, who has a similar hold on Department of Justice nominees, that this is extraordinary, that what we are doing as Republicans in objecting to the unanimous consent of these nominations is extraordinary. And I agree it's extraordinary. But what's more extraordinary is this moment in time where the leader of the opposition is being prosecuted by the President of the United States, and the Department of Justice again and again and again is using its powers to go after people, from pro-life activists to members of the community who are just exercising their rights. Mr. President, I would love to live in a country where the Department of Justice does not engage in selective prosecution. I would very much like if the Department of Justice focused on the work of law enforcement instead of politics. Until it does, I will object to these nominations. I will object to giving unanimous consent. And on these, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard. The senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, my colleague says he's holding up these critical law enforcement positions because former President Trump is being treated unfairly. He promises to grind the Department of Justice to a halt in loyalty to his political ally. President Biden has continually demonstrated his respect for the Justice Department's independence, has never interfered in any investigation into himself or his family. In contrast, President Trump treated the Justice Department as his personal law firm for 4 years, and he continues to undermine the rule of law by repeatedly threatening and making baseless accusations against judges, prosecutors, grand jurors, and witnesses. Former President Trump has been indicted 4 separate times, once, of course, a state indictment in Georgia. As the criminal charges mount, President Trump has become even more reckless in threatening judges, prosecutors, jurors, and witnesses. That is why inappropriate references in our judicial system that is what they look like. And instead of directing his concerns there, the senator from Ohio is attacking law enforcement officers who want to keep our families and communities safe. In fact, one of the nominations that he's holding up, an argument that the Department of Justice has become a political tool, is a nomination which he notified the Judiciary Committee he supports in his home state of Ohio. So if this person is a political tool, why did he support this person for this nomination? He's holding up today for political reasons. Despite the tough talk from the senator from Ohio about crime in America and all the references I have to put up regularly with the other party making references to crime in the city of Chicago, I can't think of a better way to fight crime and protect communities than by confirming all of these qualified nominees, and especially one for the Northern District of Illinois. While the senator from Ohio stands in the Senate talking about crime in my home state and other places, Ms. Perry would be leading Chicago's firearms trafficking strike force, cracking down on the illicit flow of illegal guns from other states into Chicago. The Chicago Police Department recovered more than 10,000 guns every year from criminal investigations for the last 2 years. 10,000 guns taken off the streets. Ms. Perry would be helping to coordinate these efforts with ATF and other law enforcement agencies. Instead, thanks to my colleague's political position, our law enforcement agencies and U.S. attorneys are missing key officials who would otherwise be leading these efforts. If you're for law and order, if you're for safety in the streets, if you want to reduce gun violence, how in the world can you rationalize stopping the nominations of U.S. attorneys, the lead criminal prosecutors of the U.S. Department of Justice? I'd like to give them help and leadership they need. The senator from Ohio blocks it. These offices and the safety of the public they serve should not be subject to politics. These are highly qualified nominees who deserve to be swiftly confirmed. Until we do so, our law enforcement agencies in Ohio, Illinois, Mississippi, and California are going to be limited in how they can fight crime. I really am saddened that this has become the new standard for Senate Republicans. One Senate Republican has stopped 300 military promotions for 6 months or longer. Deserving men and women, many of whom risked their life for our country, have served us so well, are being punished because of a political item on the agenda. As important as it may be, you've chosen the wrong targets to take your political revenge. The same thing is true when it comes to these nominees. For goodness sakes, give the Department of Justice the tools it needs to stop the spread of fentanyl and narcotics in the United States, to stop and slow down violent crime in the United States, to do something to protect children who are being trafficked. To stop these nominations is to turn a blind eye to the reality that faces crime in our country. I can't explain it. I won't even try to. I just beg the senator from Ohio, think twice. Grinding the U.S. Department of Justice to a halt, as you have promised, is nothing to be proud of. We will not be safer as a nation. We will not be better off in terms of the safety of our children. And this political strategy is unfortunately ill-intended. It's going to have a result which is going to hurt a lot of innocent people. I yield the floor.